Doctors, what is the weirdest thing a patient would not admit? Nurse here had parents bring their son to the emergency department for 1 month of abdominal pain that kept getting worse. I ask all the routine questions for this complaint, lots of questions about his mess. They deny any other concerning symptoms but abdominal pain. So we do tests, ultrasound, and x-ray. Everything comes back completely normal, but the kid is intermittently screaming in pain, curled in a ball. Over the next 5 hours, I continued to repeat the same questions. I asked repeatedly if there was anything else going on that they could think of. Nope. The kid just doesn't seem well, but we have no reason to keep him. We decide to watch him a little longer, let him eat. The kid eats a bunch, a PBJ, apple juice, popsicles, no pain, so we decide to send them home. I bring in the discharge paperwork and I'm about to start going over instructions, and the dad goes, for the past 3 months, he's had a lot of worms. Worms. You spent 6+ hours denying worms. I literally just turned around and walked out of the room without saying a word. I was laughing almost to the point of tears, could not wait to tell my resident. Deworming medications, a load of wasted time, and they were on their way. I guess it seems like the dad was embarrassed to have known and ignored it, so he wanted the hospital to find out on their own so that he could act all surprised and save face. Story 2. I guess it's not super weird that this patient wouldn't admit this, but it's weird in the sense that it was super obvious what happened, so he might as well just admit it. I used to do patient registration in the ER. 2 of us were wheeling around our computers and registering patients off of ambulances and getting patient information in rooms. A middle-aged guy comes in on an ambulance and my coworker takes it. So I'm finishing up some paperwork and I go to our front office and pull up the patient tracker board so I can see what still needs to be done, and a new patient pops up on the board. Chief complaint, eyeliner pens stuck down there. My coworker walks into the office looking scarred. She explained, the nurse asked him what happened and he said he slipped. She told him that doesn't seem likely. So he said he had an itch and he thought it would help. We later found out from the nurse that he finally admitted that he saw it on TV and thought it would feel good. His 20-something-year-old daughter was with him, but she clearly had some form of developmental disability. It was all around a sad situation, and I hope someone told him about it and he did some research on safe practices for it. Apparently, they were both lodged in there pretty badly. Story 3. That she could actually see. We had this lady that came into the ER at least once per month, usually with chest pain. She was morbidly obese. Had her heart, lungs, GI system examined in almost every conceivable way. One night she comes in with sudden onset blindness, not her first time with this complaint either. Last time she got a trip to the retina specialist. When I examine her, I walk around her bed and she tells her friend to get her feet off the chair so I can get by. She plays it off super cool by adding, if you have your feet up like you always do. Then the neuro exam, I have her touch her nose and touch my finger. Her idea of how a blind person would perform this exam is to touch her nose and wobble her hand from side to side as if she touched the end of my finger. Not to mention the near constant eye contact as we talked. I would ask a question and start moving while she talked, and she would follow my eye perfectly. She was extremely relieved to find out she had conversion disorder, and then her sight would be back soon. Maybe it was a factitious disorder. I tend to believe all her chest pains and crazy complaints were real feelings she was having due to a number of her social and psych issues. In the ER at midnight, it's a lot easier to tell her it is a symptom of dealing with whatever social drama was happening in her life, and that her eyes worked fine instead of telling her she was lying to me for some gain. Either way, she was sick and needed reassurance. She was genuinely relieved, though. On the finger-to-nose test, she touched my finger on the first try, but instead of a straight line, she moved her hand back and forth about 3 inches the whole way there, but directly there. My finger was probably like 2 feet in front of her face. And if eye contact was, an Olympic sport, she'd be a gold medalist, even in her blindness. Story 4. I'm a CT tech and I was to scan a woman's abdomen for belly pain. She and her girlfriend were there. I have to have a pregnancy test. I have to have one done. I even asked none, so no exceptions. She denies up and down she's pregnant, and then after the test I did, it said she was. She denied it and demanded a test. Well, the test came back positive, surprise, and the argument that ensued was biblical. She was arguing with her girlfriend, and the nurses, and the doctor. I never ended up scanning her, and they chalked up her pain to her being pregnant. The look on her girlfriend's face when I said it came back positive was one I'll never forget. The woman in the room with the patient was her SO, and they had been together for a long time, and the patient had given her SO permission in writing to allow her to hear her medical information. And many of you are saying, you shouldn't have told her in front of her SO, and you're partially right in a way, but the patient had given her SO that permission, and I didn't question it. Had she not, I would have asked her SO to leave the room. You can give anyone you deem necessary access or no access to your medical information. It's not limited to spouses. Story 5. I might be too late for the party. Also, English is not my first language and I'm on mobile. I'm an internal medicine resident, had a patient with sepsis that was being seen by the urology department. When I first read his clinical history, it stated something along the lines of infected wound in the Johnson. Patient claims he doesn't know how he got it. So I begin my assessment and ask him about his wound. Indeed, he claimed he didn't know how it happened. I decided that the priority was to stabilize the patient and I made some adjustments to antibiotics and other meds. While the guy went downhill, the sepsis became severe even though he was with the strongest antibiotics we had and 2 different vasopressors. His pressure was through the floor and eventually he needed intubation and went to the ICU. He managed to survive after a complete panectomy, and about 2 weeks later I saw him again. Turns out the dude was trying to get his dog on it and put some peanut butter. Naturally, the dog bit him. He didn't seek medical help for about 10 days before the pain and fever was too much. If we knew from the beginning that the wound was infected that way, the antibiotic would have been different, probably would have made a difference. I still feel sorry for that guy, but with a wound like that, he's lucky to be alive. Story 6. Not a doctor, but many years ago was working as an assistant to an occupational therapist. We got a call out to help mobilize a woman who had been morbidly obese and was told to lose weight. We learned from the daughter she had gained weight, but her mother would refuse to come clean on what she was eating. All the daughter knew was that her mother may have been eating deep-fried food due to the vast amounts of cooking oil she found in the pantry. When we arrived, she had gained an extra 6 kilos, but instead, she had lost weight. She did not look like it. Before we began mobilizing her and checking her living room for trip hazards, she also had horrendous knees. We took a look at the pantry. Olive oil, peanut oil, sesame oil, any kind of cooking oil you can find off a supermarket shelf, she had it. A vast stockpile of oil. We asked what she was frying with the oil. She insisted that she wasn't frying anything and that she was eating healthy since the oils she used were healthy. We had to explain to her that oils are still fatty and will still contribute to weight gain. After a bit of poking around the pantry, I noticed that for the amount of oil she had very little in food that could be traditionally fried. She also had little in other foodstuffs that could explain the obesity. I brought it up with the therapist, and the therapist then demanded the truth. We couldn't provide complete health care until we knew everything. She admitted that she thought healthy oils would help her lose weight and suppress the appetite, so she had been taken to drinking the bottles of oil whenever she got hungry. Needless to say, we disposed of most of the bottles of oil and set her up for a home visit with a dietitian. Story 7. Starting residency this week, I posted a while back but will post it here again. It wasn't super obvious at first, but after looking into her records, it became clear. So this happened on my psychiatry rotation in medical school, not currently in a psychiatry residency though. There was a patient at an inpatient psychiatric facility. She constantly insisted that she had a mass on her chest and demanded to be physically examined only by male doctors. When the psychiatrist I was rotating under declined to perform a physical exam, she asked me to do it during my daily patient interview. I also declined the physical exam but had a bit of a hunch to check her medical records. It turned out she had an ultrasound done a week before that found only normal tissue without masses. However, apparently this lady had frequented many doctors' offices with various complaints of an unspecific nature and would usually focus on complaints when she visited male physicians' offices. We diagnosed her with factitious disorder, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome, and histrionic personality disorder. It seems her goal was mostly attention from medical professionals. She had lots of issues. But we also had to be careful to make sure she wasn't fishing for a lawsuit. Patients like her are why doctors document everything meticulously. So the patient wouldn't admit to making things up all the time. According to the psychiatrist I was working with, she didn't actually believe any of her health problems exist, and her primary goal was the attention from medical professionals. If she actually believed she was sick, we would have diagnosed her with an illness anxiety disorder commonly known as hypochondria. And if you're enjoying the video and learning a thing or two from these stories, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 8. I have told this story before on Reddit, but not for a while, a story that resides at the nexus of oncology and psychiatry. So, middle-aged man enters the ER in sweatpants, worked as an accountant but currently unemployed. He tells me that a urologist had diagnosed him with inflammation of his epididymis 3 years earlier, but he hadn't followed through on the treatment, and that he now wanted to get things taken care of. During the physical exam, I see a grapefruit-sized mass. It was not subtle in any way. I call in urology and order a CT scan. I tell the guy that this isn't inflammation, it's a tumor, and we need to do more tests to find out what type of tumor. He stops me and tells me he didn't understand what I had said. Could I please repeat it? Then he pulls out a pad of paper and writes down my exact words and sits there staring at the words for a few minutes. I just felt really sorry for the guy. Story 9. Optician here. A few days ago, a man called asking if he could see an optometrist ASAP. I told him we had no spots left and asked him what seemed to be the problem. He told me he felt he had an eye infection and it's been 4 days since he can't see properly from his left eye. Sometimes clients can complain from over-tearing or swollen eyelids, but no. He told me part of his field of vision was off for the past 4 days. We have indicators such as flashes of lights or dark spots that tell us if we are dealing with an emergency worthy of being sent directly to the hospital for emergency intervention from the ophthalmology department, and this was clearly it. I told him he has to go to the emergency room right now. He tells me he has a busy shift at work and is a supervisor. I told him again to go to the hospital ASAP and to take it seriously. He tells me that he can't because his day will be scrapped. I told him to stop putting work over health and that this needed to be dealt with right now. He still argues with me and tells me that he doesn't feel like waiting in the emergency room for hours. In any case, if you have symptoms resembling a retinal detachment, you are seen almost immediately. I insist that he must go. He then tells me I'll go after my day's shift. I tell him to cut it out and go. He then tells me if it's an emergency and to tell him what he has. Given that I'm not allowed to give any diagnosis by the phone, I told him to hurry to the hospital. He told me he would, and I'm pretty sure he stuck to his plan of finishing the day. Retinal detachment can usually be treated, if noticed, quickly. Story 10. A few years ago, I had one kid who eventually had heard of a challenge where you can fully insert a light bulb into your mouth, but when you try to pull it out, you can't open your jaw wide enough and the bulb shatters inside. Well, after about 3 hours of picking glass, I asked what went down, and he just would not admit that he put the light bulb in his mouth. His main story was that his friend must have slipped it in his mouth when he was sleeping. However, upon talking to his friend in another room, he confessed that the boy had tried to beat the challenge. His friend even showed me videos of other people trying it. So I went back in with the patient and brought his guardians in this case an aunt and uncle, and explained the whole light bulb challenge without giving his friend up. When asked what I was talking about, I explained and said there are many videos on the internet about the exact thing I'm talking about. They also revealed that he had tried several dangerous stunts and challenges before, but even still, he wouldn't admit a thing. He was adamant that he had absolutely no part in his injury and that everyone was out to get him. It's just crazy to me how arrogant and thick-headed some people will get. They'll do anything before admitting to doing something that stupid and short-sighted. Story 11. FNP here, had a first job out of school doing Medicaid risk assessment for insurance companies. I basically had to do complete family social extensive reviews and complete PE and head-to-toe and make any new preliminary DX and referrals for the insurance company in 60 minutes. Very taxing, but it definitely helped me hone down my skills in getting information from patients quickly and efficiently, and especially with my charting, but that's a different issue. So I had this one patient, right, and doing my thing, getting their family history, etc. Normally, pretty good disclosure about obvious things, especially if they are being treated for things like drinking problems, etc. I got to smoking history and expected to hear 20 ppd for 15 years. Given the smell in the house and the open blunt on the table that was pretty clearly going to be rolled before I arrived, this woman with a 10-month-old on her lap looks me in the eye and says no to any and all smoking history. I stop and look her in the eye and say, "Are you absolutely sure?" "What's this?" Points to cigar blunt open. "Yeah, that's not mine." "You live with a SO at all or roommates?" "No." Okay. I had gone over my self-imposed time limit on that charting section, so I just wrote down no in the chart and had her DX and referred for substance misuse. I wasn't about to argue with a woman who couldn't admit an issue so clearly right in both of our faces. Yeah, I guess some people would rather swallow their pride along with a light bulb than admit they made a mistake. Story 12. Not a doctor, but I worked in an animal hospital for a while. We had a dog come in terrible shape. Broke my heart to see as I was in the room with the vet. The owners swear that they had no idea what was wrong. Said the dog had been inside for most of the day and that they didn't think it had gotten into anything that could cause it to be so sick. We ended up keeping the dog to further watch it and monitor its condition. One doctor thought it could be acute toxicity or something along the lines of that, from eating substances or a brownie or something. Had good reason to believe it because the owners reeked of substances. However, when asked, both insisted they had never used that and that there was no way the dog could have ingested any. Because we weren't sure of what was happening, we placed the dog in quarantine in case it was something contagious that could spread to other dogs in the hospital. And when we did that, we had to completely disinfect the room. I went in to start cleaning it, wiping down counters, walls, instruments, etc. As soon as I started sweeping, I noticed something on the ground. I leaned down to take a closer look, thinking it's just a mess or something. But what did it end up being? A little nug of the substance. I immediately told one of the vet techs who called the owners. They got super nervous after asking if they were sure that the dog didn't ingest anything, and hung up almost immediately after being asked. Seeing as we weren't sure though still, we couldn't treat the dog for toxicity. 2 other doctors tried calling and nicely asking with the same result as the vet tech. Finally, my favorite and super sassy vet called and tore them a new one, basically saying they needed to own up to it if the dog accidentally ingested that, or else they may not end up having a dog to pick up from the hospital in a few days. And that was the point where they decided to mention that a quarter of their freshly baked brownies were missing. I was off shortly after this happened, so I don't know exactly what they ended up doing, but as far as I know, the pupper ended up surviving and recovering a day or 2 later. Sweetest dog, too. Even in the terrible shape he came into the hospital with, he loved everyone. Those owners almost lost their dog because they were too afraid to admit their habits. Story 13. ER resident here, the most recent. Woman brought in by ambulance with a first epileptic seizure, had been suffering from abdominal pain since this morning. Noticed a very obvious tremor. Checked her file and noticed she already had pancreatitis twice before. Yet when I asked her, she straight up refused to admit drinking on a regular basis. The weirdest? A 10-year-old boy is brought in by ambulance with a wound. Upon inspection, however, there is a stained gap in his trousers on the left backside while still intact where the wound was. Mother said he was at a playground. The kid claims he went into the bushes to whiz and hurt himself on a branch. When asking if anyone removed his pants, he straight up denied it. I asked the mother and she said he was wearing his pants when he came out of the bushes, and the paramedics didn't remove them. When removing his pants, the wound seemed way too linear and clean to be inflicted by a branch. I wanted to contact our forensic department to come and take a look at the wound, but my supervisor dismissed the idea and obligated me to simply clean the wound and suture him up. I never found out what actually happened. Story 14. Not a doctor. This is a story my mother heard from a colleague when she was working at the hospital. So this old lady shows up for strange symptoms. She has recently been in a car accident with her son, seemingly unscathed, but she claims to have headaches, dizziness, and she seems a little confused. But she's also very old, like very old. So that's not terribly alarming. The doctor brings her in and she's stressed she has a weird feeling in the neck. While pressing on the neck, the doctor feels a bump in the back and decides to take an x-ray of it. This is Italy, so this stuff takes time. The results, the whiplash from the incident briefly moved the stuff onwards. By simply pushing one hand on her chest and one hand on the back of her head in the opposite direction, she would have immediately passed away. The doctor was well known to be a chill guy, but the moment he saw the x-rays, he ran outside the office and screamed, "Nobody touched the old lady." So yeah, she didn't omit things willingly, but I still think it's a pretty messed up story. And if you liked any of these stories and learned a thing or two from them, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.